if you're not resting, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're wasting time. That's weird, right? That sucks. Because taking care of yourself, that feels like a waste of time. At least for my whole life, taking care of myself has felt like a waste of time. And I don't even always think that that was tied to thinking that I didn't deserve being taken care of. I don't think that's. I think it contributed to that. Sure, it could turn into that for foreseeably for someone who's going under circumstances of a similar nature. But I think part of it is just that there's always so much to do. There's just so much to do, and there always is, and there always was. At least that's what we think, right? That's what most people think, is that there's always work has always been part of life, and that's true. But it hasn't always been like this. There hasn't always been the need to perform at superhuman levels just to achieve a modicum of physical and social comfort in life, right? Like there have been times throughout human history where there wasn't such a risk of slipping through the cracks. And I used to think that that was an oversight, right? It's like how could we have lost the community? And increasingly, I think it's becoming clear that it is less of an oversight and more of a gosh an intentionality, like a strategy. They don't just want more people to fall through the cracks, they want the cracks to get bigger. And I think we're starting to see why. I think we're starting to see that there's a little bit more to wealth than meets the eye for most people. I think, obviously, like, there's a ton of people going back centuries, millennia even, who said similar things. I don't know if it has ever been this grotesque. I mean, certainly, to some degree, even to some degree, it must have been this bad the whole time. Because it led to this, right? There was always an inclination for human behavior to be led in the direction of laying the foundation for their own collapse. Because we are here, and we didn't get here alone. It's not just people who speak like me. It's a lot of people who look like me. But it extends. It's not political party. It's not regionality. It's not nationality. So the cracks are getting bigger. There are more people to fall through them and fewer people to catch them. And we are still delirious and bleary-eyed because there's still so much to do. How you know, who can relax? At least that's what almost everyone I think feels, is that they haven't relaxed. And I feel the same way. But I'm still hopeful. And the reason for that is because I have realized there's people who will tell a lie and then they'll get caught. And for some reason, I don't know if this is from watching too many cartoons, I kind of, when someone tells a really dumb lie and gets caught in like a cartoon, and the main character like says something about it, they're like, oh, like they're like, oh, I can't believe he caught me or something. Like they're like, or their friends turn to them and they're like, you said that? And so what I guess I didn't expect is that, when someone lies to you point blank to your face or on a screen or whatever, and you call them out, sometimes they will, even in the face of overwhelming evidence, they'll double down, they'll triple down, quadruple down. I think that's a bummer. And it's more than a bummer because it starts at like a bummer level, but obviously it extends to just a horrifically despicable level beyond the average person's comprehension or willingness to comprehend, which in some ways is the same thing. So we've made enemies of rest. We've made enemies of comfort. We've determined that we don't deserve it. In a way, though, what we're doing when we do that is collectively punishing ourselves for the actions of people who share our likeness, but not our character. And something funny happened when I stopped punishing myself for people who I don't even agree with, people I don't even like, people who disgust me. When I stopped punishing myself for those people, life got a whole lot easier, So people see me now, they meet me, they encounter me, or even just at first glance, Someone gave me such a weird look at the grocery store today. I was like, like, bro, I don't even know you. Why'd you give me the stink eye for? It's like, so this happened. I think people assume, they see me, they assume if I have any semblance of not being visibly distressed, that I must be oblivious. So it's become this epidemic in a way where we can't rest long enough to feel like we deserve to rest. We don't do enough for ourselves to feel like we deserve to do more for ourselves. And it's not that I don't resonate with that, right? It's not that I haven't gone through long periods of my life where I identified strongly with that belief. It's just that it was a long time ago for me, and I made it out the other side because I had no other choice. And I have felt for so long like the world is days or weeks from ending. And I had to get used to realizing that it never did. But even if it did, even if it was about to end, either way, I was wasting my time. Well, because, okay, imagine that I had 100% certainty that in 1 week the world will end. For me or for anybody. You know, to me, that doesn't. For any individual, the end of the world is the end of yourself. It doesn't make a discernible difference. And even if I had that certainty, that in 7 days to the dot, stroke of midnight, the world ends, what would I do? You know, it's like, first I had to come to terms. You know, you would have to come to terms with the fact that no one's going to believe you. Firstly, even if it's so obvious, no one's going to believe you because they don't know what you know. They haven't seen what you've seen. They've interpreted it differently. They don't know the depths of what's possible. So no one's going to believe you. So you can't make a difference, right? The world's going to end either way. No matter what you do for the next 7 days, the world's going to end. So what do? You know? And that time that you spend once you get past the point once you get past stopping, like no more trying to convince people, just like certainty, surrender. The time that you spend with full acknowledgement that the world is going to end in 7 days would be indistinguishable from the time that you would spend with full certainty that the world was not going to end in 7 days. You know, if you knew either way, the best thing that you could do is what felt right, you know. The best thing you could do is relax. Try to find something that makes you feel better, lets you experience the rest with a little less suffering attached. So if that's either end, if that's the pole in either direction, then what should you do if you don't know? So if you knew for certain, you wouldn't waste time panicking, or you'd hope that you wouldn't. If you knew for certain that it wasn't going to end, you wouldn't waste time panicking because, okay, now I know it's not going to end. So in the middle there's this uncertainty, and that's almost worse. I think for a lot of people that lack of certainty is one of the worst parts of life, and that's real, you know. But the question remains, what do you do with that time? And I read something about the death of Socrates. I guess he spent his final hours, you know, remember, people tried to break him out of jail. They actually successfully could have broken him out of jail. And he was like, nah, I'm going to stay here. They want me dead, I'm going to die. Which is like, I always found that hard to understand. I still do. But what struck me is that apparently maybe this is a folktale, I don't know. I haven't learned that much about him. Apparently, he was learning how to play some song on the flute. And the guards asked him, what's the point of knowing that song on the flute before you die? And he said, the point is knowing the song on the flute before I die. That was the point. What was he going to do? You know? He decided he was not going to escape. He decided he was going to serve his sentence, which was poison. So how did he spend his time? Not stressing. Just doing something that brought him a little life. So we have this fascination with pushing ourselves to the limit and then pretending like we don't have a limit. And then everyone's pushed to the limit. Everyone's pretending. No one's doing anything right. Everyone's like literally hopped up on whatever. At least coffee. Everyone's hopped up on coffee and doing their best to keep up this facade that things are okay, and they haven't been okay for a long time. So I was coming to terms with all that as I was coming to terms with the fact that I hadn't been okay for a long time. And when I look back on what got me through those months, when I thought that alternatively, I alternatingly thought that I was going to die, or that the world was going to end, or that World War III was going to start. All fears that like people have right now, I was having in 2020 or 2021. Things were not looking good. They were not. And so I had to come to terms with being a human, caring so deeply about the fate of the vulnerable, and realizing, knowing increasingly that I had not lived up to those values in the past. Sometimes, sure, not consistently. So I hated myself. I also thought that there was a chance that I would catch something that would kill me or the person I was living with. And I thought also potentially I might get drafted into the conflict in the Eastern Bloc. And all of that none of that ever really changed. And I'm not saying that things aren't going to change this time. This is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I had to get used to being a human under those conditions, because I recognized that we were never going back. And here we are. I knew back then that there was no chance normal was ever returning. And increasingly, it's looking like that's true. But what's weird is that it's not unpredictable. It's not out of nowhere. It's in fact exactly what people said was going to happen, with sources, with studies, with facts and figures. And we got here anyway. So what is the lesson in all this, right? Is that the people who were not taking that time to learn how to be human under these conditions were taking the time to practice pretending like those conditions didn't exist. So they were continue to push themselves to the brink. Continue to see rest as a waste of time. If I'm not working, if I'm not socializing, I should be eating or sleeping. It's like we've created enemies, not just of rest, but of ourselves. We can't be alone with ourselves. And I think it's because we don't want to give ourselves that comfort. And so when we do get to be alone with ourselves, instead we give ourselves a lot of pain. And for some people, that's where the journey ends. They say, when I'm with myself, I give myself pain, so I don't. I'm always with people, or I'm always with work, or I'm always playing video games, or I'm always engaging with something outside of myself. I'm always reading. I'm always listening to something. I'm not saying I'm immune to this. I'm not saying I haven't done this or that I still don't in some capacity. I just think we need to recognize that if we are not giving ourselves time to rest, we are going to make and continue to make terrible mistakes. From what I've seen in my life, there are people who enjoy punishing others. And what we're seeing is what happens when those people assume positions of power. And when they weed out anyone who disagrees, who thinks maybe we shouldn't. Enjoy punishing people so much that we keep on coming up with new reasons to punish them. Those kinds of people don't make it very far anymore. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So as we're distracting ourselves, not giving ourselves time to think, we don't notice that they're taking more and more from us every day, every month, every year. Well, some of us notice more and more. But why did it take so long, And there was this great book I've been meaning to check out. I haven't read it yet, but I heard someone talk about it in a YouTube video. It was a book about why someone's life's mission was to figure out why people embrace authoritarian structures. And I think at the very least you can say is that it is a deeply human drive to want to have someone telling you what to do, to want certainty, to want to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that every decision you make is going to be the right one, that every opinion you hold is correct, that every choice you make about your life is the one that's going to lead you to happiness. But what's funny is that once you accept that there is no such certainty, that happiness becomes a lot easier to find. It becomes closer to reach. It's this, I was having dinner with a friend, and he expressed that he also felt this way, that sometimes it feels like the best parts of you are still there, the parts of yourself that you miss, that you used to feel confident about, maybe you don't anymore, they're still there. But we've just caked so much nonsense on top of it. And the only comparison we could think of was a dung beetle. It's the dung beetle theory is like, what if a dung beetle started with like a ball of gold, but then just started rolling it around? It's like the gold is still there, but the only person who's gonna go through it is the person who owns it. It's your dung beetle, man. And once you get down to the gold, you start to realize that there's a lot more outside of your control than even you thought, right? Because I think a lot of people, they like to go down this path part way, and they say it's all about the choices you make, you know, which, you know, obviously is true to some degree. But they often try to take it in this kind of like individualistic direction where it's like, oh, you could fix everything in your life, but you choose not to. I don't think that's quite accurate. I think, though, that the more you choose yourself, the more those problems sort themselves out. And I feel a lot lighter. So when people see me happy and they think, that guy must be an idiot, you know, or he must be clueless, he must not know what's going on. I wish that was true sometimes. Obviously, I wouldn't turn back if I could. But I'm liberated by what I know. I knew it a long time ago. I had to remember some of it, and I had to learn some other parts. And then once I came to terms with the world and my place in it, and I don't mean that in a diminutive way, you know, just the world is bigger than you. You do have a place in it. I'm not saying that you're confined to a single place, but the place you're in will always be yours. And nobody else's. And that's part of what makes it so hard. And that's part of what makes it so beautiful. And once you can start to appreciate that, it's that you never will have another person. You always will be. It's just gonna be you. I'm not saying you won't have people around you, but like, you're never going to get to find out what it's like to be someone else. So if you start to try to act like someone else, the world's never going to get to know you. And you find yourself by resting. You find yourself by doing what you like. You know, how obvious is it? But it's hard to capture. But once you do accept yourself and your place in the world, then the changes kind of start to become obvious in some ways. You know, it's like I made some massive changes in my life, and I knew it would be hard, some of them, and I knew that they would be permanent. And I knew that other people, some people I cared about a lot, wouldn't like them. But I had to recognize that I cared about them a lot more than they cared about me. And so if I cared about me, I needed to be around people who, at a minimum, would let me care about me. And yeah, I hurt some feelings. It goes both ways. I'm the bad guy in a lot of people's stories because of how I choose myself. But I think it's because I look for partners, not just romantically. In life, I don't want lackeys. I want partners. But a lot of people see that as a reason too. They like to make me the sidekick in their head. They're like, oh, this is the best sidekick ever. Like, I would be the best sidekick ever. But I'm past that stage, right? And I expect other people to be too. And that is obviously not the case. People have not been as far along as I would have liked them to be in some ways. That's why I had to leave 2 living situations. I kept expecting them to figure out that I was sometimes right, even if they didn't understand what I was saying. Because that's kind of my default. Even if I don't understand what someone says, I seek to understand. And I feel like a lot of people just don't give me that courtesy. They start to expect it from me, but they also like to think that, oh, well, he always gets it after a while, so I'm always right, you know? But I never get what he's saying, so he must be stupid. Myopic. You know? I'm always open to new information. People who think that they have all the information they need already are the ones who get so certain that they can't be wrong. It's liberating to just accept that part of myself, that I just like knowing things. I just have a lot of information. But people like to see me as a resource that never asks for anything in return. And I often give freely because I always wanted someone like that. But I've done that for long enough that I've realized that who I am is incompatible with self-abandonment. I think that's true of everyone. I just had to realize it for myself. because I didn't know what self-abandonment looked like. The more I thought about it, I realized it was just about everything I was doing on a day-to-day basis. So I'm glad that I've learned that about myself. I'm glad that I like myself now. I'm glad that I know myself. And I knew myself by spending time with myself, and sometimes it was hard. Sometimes I wanted to tear myself apart. Sometimes I made some progress emotionally. Even that can be hard. I recommend working with a professional. You don't have to do it yourself. I had great success with that. But at a certain point, you do start to take over with your own skills. That's the goal, at least. So you learn how to talk to yourself. You learn how to spend time with yourself. And the more I realize that that's what I've been learning to do the whole time, the more I realize that, gosh, I have never felt like this was okay. I've never felt like it was okay to be content, to be happy. Never. Even when I was a kid, there was always a reason bigger than me why people wanted me to shut up about what I was doing. I think people just kind of expect that I get it. I get that kind of praise from someone else, so I just expect it from everyone. I don't get it from anyone, right? Not even myself. Not to the level that I give to other people. And that sucks too. But it's part of life. And once I accepted that, I realized that I don't have to continue to choose to give so much of myself to people who take it freely and then become accustomed to the flow. Because I don't think I'll get stuck in that situation again with anyone. But the fact that I did, and they just thought, oh, he's just superhuman. He's my rock. Even worse, they start to think that that's what I'm thinking about myself. And then they start to poke holes in me. I'm like, okay, so now I'm doing all this for you and not doing anything for myself, and you're being mean to me? What is the goal here? I hate to link it to what's going on, but I am certainly glad that some people from my past don't have power institutionally over others. Because we're seeing what people who enjoy hurting others do with those types of positions. And they never really had power over me, right? That's the thing. It's like, I am one of the lucky ones. I saw what people like that would do to someone who really didn't have power, because I really was giving my power away. But when I took it back, it was like I took off a drag suit. I don't know if you know what a drag suit is. Swimmers wear them over their swimsuits. It like creates drag, so it makes it harder to swim. Then you take it off and you go faster. I kind of felt like what it was, right? So even if I'm continuing to not do what other people expect of me, I know that I'm doing better and better every day. And yeah, it's weird to feel that way when the world's about to end, but the world's been about to end as long as I've been paying attention, and for some people, they've been paying attention for much longer. For some people, the world did entire nations existed where I stand. Their world ended. So once I started to recognize the world and my place in it, the sheer scale, the significance of groups of people and of individuals, I realized that I didn't have time to rush around, wasting my energy wearing myself to the bone. For what? For the promise of a future that is looking less certain every day. Right? So as I learned how to be good to myself, how to rest, everything else got easier. And it turns out there's studies to back this up. There's studies about how if you're not taking time to rest, you're going to do worse overall. It feels like, oh, I don't have time to stop for 10 minutes, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, well, now it's going to take 30 minutes longer. You don't think about that, right? You can't really measure that. You can't feel that. You just kind of have to trust that when your body tells you to take a break, you should probably take a break. And I've been ignoring that call for so many years that when I started to rest for the first time, it felt foreign. It felt poisonous. But that was the poison talking.